You're sitting in a meeting, and someone says something so fundamentally wrong that you can feel your brain recoiling. Not just incorrect, wrong in a way that reveals they haven't thought about the issue at all. And you realize they have no idea they're wrong. In fact, they seem completely confident. Or maybe you're scrolling through social media, watching people celebrate achievements you abandoned years ago because you saw through them. That promotion, that relationship milestone, that motivational quote about crushing your goals. And you feel nothing. Worse than nothing. You feel isolated, alienated, like you're watching a species you no longer belong to. Here's the question nobody wants to ask. What if intelligence doesn't make life better? What if seeing clearly, actually understanding how the world works, is a curse disguised as a gift? You've been told your whole life that being smart is an advantage, that knowledge is power, that understanding leads to fulfillment. But somehow, the more you understand, the less satisfied you become. The more you see, the more trapped you feel. The sharper your mind gets, the duller everything else appears. This isn't depression. This isn't a chemical imbalance you can fix with therapy or medication. This is structural. This is what happens when a conscious mind becomes too aware of the mechanisms running beneath consciousness itself. 200 years ago, Arthur Schopenhauer explained exactly why this happens, why the smartest people in history, from Virginia Woolf to David Foster Wallace, ended their own lives, why your sharp mind isn't your greatest asset, but your heaviest burden, and why understanding this truth might be the only thing that saves you from it. Let's talk about why being smart means suffering more, and what you do when you finally accept that reality. Think about the happiest people you know. Really think about them. Are they the deepest thinkers, the most analytical minds, the people who question everything? No. They're the ones who don't question much at all, the ones who accept simple explanations, who believe what they're told, who find comfort in routines, traditions, and mainstream narratives. They work their jobs without wondering if the entire economic system is fundamentally exploitative. They enjoy their relationships without analyzing whether romantic love is just evolutionary programming. They watch a sunset without thinking about the heat death of the universe. Schopenhauer saw this with brutal clarity. He wrote, "The more intelligence an individual possesses, the more vividly and perceptibly does he experience the tragedy of life." This isn't metaphor. This is mechanism. Consciousness itself is the problem. Here's what he understood. You are not your thoughts. You are the will, a blind, purposeless force that drives all living things toward survival and reproduction. Your intelligence? That's just the tool the will uses to achieve its goals. But here's the trap. Intelligence, when developed enough, becomes aware of the will itself. It sees the puppet strings, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. You watch people pursue careers, relationships, status, and you see the will operating through them. The man working 80 hours a week isn't ambitious. He's driven by unconscious biological imperatives and social conditioning he'll never examine. The woman obsessed with her appearance isn't taking care of herself. She's responding to evolutionary pressures that predate human consciousness by millions of years. And you see it. You see the mechanisms. You understand that free will is probably an illusion, that meaning is constructed rather than discovered, that everything you do is ultimately driven by forces beyond your control. The less intelligent person doesn't see any of this. They live within the illusion. They believe in their choices, their purposes, their narratives. And because they believe, they suffer less. Ignorance isn't just bliss, it's the only reliable path to contentment. Schopenhauer again. The normal man is in the full enjoyment of his meal, while the thinker is already pondering whether life is worth living. This is your life now. You can't enjoy the meal because you're too busy analyzing whether hunger itself is just another form of suffering, whether the pleasure of eating is just temporary relief from the pain of not eating, whether the entire cycle of desire and satisfaction is a cosmic joke with you as the punchline. The smarter you get, the more clearly you see that consciousness, your consciousness, is less a gift and more a glitch in the system, a bug in the code that became aware of its own programming. And that awareness, that's where the suffering begins. Let's map this out systematically. Why does intelligence increase suffering? What's the actual mechanism? First, pattern recognition. Your brain sees patterns everywhere. That's literally what intelligence is, the ability to identify relationships, predict outcomes, extrapolate from limited data. But this gift becomes a curse when you start recognizing the patterns in human behavior, social systems, and your own psychology. You see how advertising manipulates desire, how political systems maintain power through manufactured consent, how relationships follow predictable scripts written by evolution and reinforced by culture. You recognize these patterns so clearly that you can predict exactly how conversations will unfold, how people will react, what they'll say before they say it. And once you can predict it, you can't be surprised by it. And once you can't be surprised, you can't be delighted. Life becomes a series of variations on themes you've already analyzed to death. Second, the burden of possibility. Less intelligent people live in a narrower reality. They see fewer options, fewer consequences, fewer potential futures. This isn't a disadvantage, it's a protection. When you can only see 3 possible paths forward, choosing one is relatively simple. When you can see 30, each branching into hundreds more, paralysis sets in. Schopenhauer observed, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." But what he didn't say explicitly, what he showed through his own miserable life, is that seeing targets nobody else can see means being perpetually disappointed when others can't help you hit them. You're in a conversation about politics, art, relationships, anything meaningful, and you can see dimensions of the issue that your conversation partner cannot access, not won't access, cannot. Their cognitive framework doesn't support the level of nuance you're operating at. So you simplify, you dumb it down, you translate your actual thoughts into language they can process. And in that translation, something dies, the precision, the complexity, the thing that made the insight valuable in the first place. Third, existential awareness. The less intelligent person doesn't spend much time contemplating mortality, meaninglessness, or the ultimate futility of human endeavor. They're too busy living, too distracted by immediate concerns, too comforted by simple narratives about purpose and progress. You can't stop thinking about it. You lie awake at night, knowing that everything you build will decay, everyone you love will die, every achievement will be forgotten. The universe itself will eventually collapse into heat death, erasing every trace that conscious life ever existed. This isn't depression talking, this is just fact, uncomfortable fact. And intelligence means confronting uncomfortable facts without the protective delusion that makes those facts bearable. You suffer more because you see more. You see more because you're smarter. And being smarter offers no compensation for the suffering it creates, only the cold comfort of knowing exactly why you're suffering. That's the equation. Intelligence equals awareness. Awareness equals suffering. And there's no way to become less aware once you've crossed that threshold. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. The stupid are happier, not occasionally, not by accident, systematically, structurally. The cognitive limitations that make someone less intelligent are the same limitations that protect them from existential suffering. Think about the Dunning-Kruger effect. The least competent people are the most confident. Why? Because they lack the metacognitive ability to assess their own competence. They don't know what they don't know, and that ignorance feels like knowledge. But here's what the research doesn't emphasize. This isn't just about professional competence. This is about life. The person who doesn't question whether their marriage is based on authentic connection or just biological programming, they enjoy their marriage more. The person who doesn't analyze whether their career contributes anything meaningful to the world, they feel more satisfied with their work. Schopenhauer put it perfectly. As the biggest library, if it is in disorder, is not as useful as a small but well-arranged one, so you may accumulate a vast amount of knowledge, but it will be of far less value than a much smaller amount if you have not thought it over for yourself. But he also understood the inverse. Sometimes not thinking things over for yourself is the key to contentment. Sometimes analysis destroys enjoyment. Sometimes understanding prevents peace. You watch people celebrate holidays you know are arbitrary cultural constructs. You see them moved by music engineered to trigger specific emotional responses. You observe them forming political opinions based on whatever narrative reached them first, never questioning the framing, never examining the assumptions. And they seem fine, better than fine, happy. Meanwhile, you're paralyzed by awareness. You can't enjoy the holiday because you're thinking about consumerism and manufactured nostalgia. You can't lose yourself in the music because you're analyzing the chord progressions and production techniques. You can't hold a political opinion without immediately seeing its limitations, contradictions, and unexamined premises. This is what intelligence does. It removes you from direct experience and places you in perpetual observation mode. You're no longer a participant in life, you're an analyst of it. And analysis and enjoyment are fundamentally incompatible. Schopenhauer again. Life swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom. But for the intelligent person, the swing is faster and more violent. You achieve what you wanted and immediately see through the achievement. You satisfy a desire and instantly recognize the desire was arbitrary. You reach a goal and realize the goal was chosen by programming you didn't write. The ignorant person gets to enjoy their achievement for a while before boredom sets in. You're bored before you even finish celebrating because you've already analyzed what just happened and predicted what comes next. Ignorance wins because ignorance allows immersion, and immersion is the only state in which humans experience something resembling happiness. You lost access to that state the moment you got smart enough to question it.
Here's where it gets worse. Intelligence doesn't just make you aware of suffering, it amplifies your capacity to suffer by expanding the territory of possible desire. Schopenhauer's central insight was that suffering is inherent in desire itself, not in failing to achieve what you want, but in wanting at all. He wrote, "All satisfaction, or what is commonly called happiness, is really and essentially always negative only, and never positive." What he meant, pleasure is just temporary relief from pain. Hunger is pain. Eating removes the pain. But eating isn't positive pleasure, it's the absence of the negative state of hunger. Now add intelligence to this equation. The less intelligent person has simpler desires: food, shelter, sex, social approval. Their want machine operates in a limited domain. When they satisfy these basic desires, they experience relief. And because their imagination is limited, they don't immediately generate more complex desires to replace the ones they satisfied. Your desires are infinite and abstract. You don't just want food, you want the perfect meal prepared according to specific aesthetic and ethical standards, consumed in an environment that meets your elevated requirements. You don't just want social approval, you want recognition specifically from people whose opinions you respect, based on achievements you consider meaningful. Worse, you have meta-desires, desires about desires. You want to want the right things. You analyze whether your desires are authentic or socially conditioned. You feel guilty for wanting shallow things and empty when you achieve deep things. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. Mystery generates curiosity. Curiosity generates desire. Desire generates suffering. The intelligent person cannot stop generating new objects of desire because they cannot stop generating new thoughts. Every book you read introduces you to ideas you didn't know you wanted to understand. Every conversation exposes you to lifestyles you didn't know you wanted to live. Every analysis reveals gaps in your knowledge that you suddenly need to fill. You're trapped in an accelerating cycle. Your intelligence creates desires. Those desires create suffering when unsatisfied. Satisfying them creates temporary relief, followed immediately by boredom. Boredom creates new desires, and your intelligence ensures those new desires are more complex, more difficult to satisfy, and more ultimately meaningless than the last batch. The stupid person wants a comfortable life and gets reasonably close to it. You want what? Transcendence, purpose, understanding? Things that might not even exist. Things that, if they do exist, your intelligence has already convinced you are probably unattainable. Intelligence doesn't expand your capacity for happiness. It expands your capacity for wanting, and wanting is suffering. You're a more sophisticated want machine than most people. Congratulations, your reward is more sophisticated suffering.
Let's talk about what intelligence does to your relationships, to your connection with other human beings, to your ability to feel less alone in the world. Schopenhauer was notoriously misanthropic. He preferred his dog to most people. Why? Not because he was cruel or antisocial, but because he understood something fundamental. Intellectual compatibility is rare, and without it, human connection becomes performance rather than communion. He wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free." This isn't about being antisocial. This is about the mathematics of distribution. If you're in the 95th percentile of intelligence, only 5% of the population can engage with ideas at your level. If you're in the 99th percentile, you're intellectually compatible with one person in 100. And intellectual compatibility isn't the same as physical proximity. You might work with 50 people and find none of them capable of the conversations you need. You know this already. You've felt it 1,000 times. You're in a group setting and someone says something that would require 20 minutes of context just to explain why it's wrong. But nobody else in the group seems bothered by it. They nod along. They accept the premise. They move on. And you have a choice. Do you interrupt the flow of conversation to correct a misconception nobody else even noticed? Do you let it go and feel the cognitive dissonance of sitting silently while falsehood propagates? Do you attempt a simplified correction that doesn't actually address the real problem? Every choice leads to alienation. Correct them, and you're that person, the one who ruins the vibe by being pedantic. Stay silent, and you feel complicit. Simplify your correction, and you're frustrated by your own intellectual compromise. This is why intelligent people often prefer books to people, not because books are better conversational partners, but because books don't require you to regulate your intelligence. You can engage with Dostoevsky or Joyce at full capacity without worrying that you're making them uncomfortable. You can argue with Nietzsche in your head without being accused of arrogance. But humans need humans. Your intelligence doesn't eliminate your social needs, it just makes them nearly impossible to satisfy. You're trapped wanting connection with beings who cannot connect with you at the level you need. Schopenhauer again. We forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. For the average person, this is a reasonable trade. For you, it's erasure. Being like other people means suppressing precisely what makes you you, the depth, the complexity, the relentless analysis. So you choose. Do you forfeit 3/4 of yourself to fit in, or do you remain yourself and accept profound loneliness? Most intelligent people oscillate between these poles their entire lives, performing normalcy until the exhaustion becomes unbearable, then retreating into isolation until the loneliness becomes unbearable, then performing normalcy again. And the smarter you are, the wider the gap between your authentic self and the version you perform, the greater the exhaustion, the deeper the loneliness. Intelligence isolates you. And unlike other forms of isolation, this one can't be solved by putting yourself out there or being more social. The problem isn't quantity of connection, it's quality. And quality requires compatibility that the mathematics of distribution simply don't support.
If intelligence amplifies suffering, if awareness prevents peace, if understanding creates isolation, what's the path forward? What do you actually do with this knowledge? First, let's be clear about what you don't do. You don't try to become less intelligent. You don't pursue ignorance. You don't lobotomize yourself with substances or distractions to dull the pain of consciousness. That path leads to addiction, depression, and the complete dissolution of whatever self you've built. You also don't fight the reality of your situation. You don't rage against the unfairness of being cursed with awareness. You don't resent stupid people for their happiness. That's just creating additional suffering on top of the structural suffering you already carry. So what do? You accept it. Completely, fundamentally, without reservation or hope that it will change. Schopenhauer's entire philosophy points toward one solution: accept that life is suffering, that consciousness amplifies that suffering, and that your intelligence guarantees you'll suffer more consciously than most. Once you accept this, not intellectually, but viscerally, you stop fighting reality and start working within it. He wrote, "To live happily is to live with an appropriate illusion." But for you, maintaining illusion is impossible. Your intelligence burns through comforting lies too quickly. So instead of pursuing happiness, that false promise sold to you by people who don't understand consciousness, you pursue something else: clarity and aesthetic appreciation. Here's what that looks like practically. First, reduce unnecessary desire. You already know desire generates suffering, so stop feeding the machine. Stop consuming content designed to make you want things. Stop comparing your life to others. Stop pursuing achievements you don't actually care about just because society says they matter. Simplify your life down to what remains essential after brutal analysis. This isn't asceticism for its own sake. This is strategic reduction of suffering vectors. Every desire you eliminate is one less source of pain. Second, cultivate aesthetic experience. Schopenhauer believed that art offered temporary relief from the will's tyranny. When you're fully absorbed in music, literature, or nature, you momentarily escape the cycle of desire and suffering. Your intelligence, normally your enemy, becomes your ally here. You can appreciate complexity in art that others can't access. You can find beauty in ideas themselves. This is why intelligent people often become obsessed with art, philosophy, or science, not because these things make them happy, but because they offer brief respites from the burden of consciousness. Fourth, accept intellectual isolation as the price of intellectual honesty. You will never have as many deep connections as someone who operates at a more accessible cognitive level. Accept this. Stop trying to force compatibility where it doesn't exist. Instead, value the rare connections you do find. When you meet someone who can engage with ideas at your level, recognize that as the statistical anomaly it is. Cultivate that relationship carefully. And when you're alone, which will be often, understand that this solitude is not a punishment. It's simply the natural result of being an outlier. Fourth, use your intelligence strategically. Yes, analysis destroys direct experience, but it also enables you to see through manipulations that entrap others. You won't get financially exploited by schemes that prey on cognitive biases. You won't stay in relationships that are clearly dysfunctional. You won't waste years pursuing goals that your analysis reveals as empty. Your intelligence is a burden, yes, but it's also armor. Use it as such.
Let me give you the ultimate insight Schopenhauer arrived at after decades of philosophical analysis. You were not built to be happy. You were built to survive and reproduce. Happiness is not your default state. It's a brief neurochemical trick that evolution uses to reward behaviors that promote survival. Once you understand this, you stop expecting happiness and start expecting exactly what you get. Wanting, striving, suffering, temporary relief, then more wanting. The intelligent person suffers more because they see this machinery clearly, but seeing it clearly also offers something else: freedom from false hope. Most people suffer and believe they shouldn't be suffering. They think something is wrong with them, their circumstances, their choices. They believe the lie that happiness is normal and suffering is aberration. So they add psychological suffering on top of existential suffering, the pain of believing their pain shouldn't exist. You don't have to do that. You can suffer without the illusion that suffering is abnormal. You can experience desire without believing that satisfying desires will bring lasting fulfillment. You can live without expecting life to be fair, meaningful, or ultimately satisfying. This is the paradox. Accepting that life is suffering reduces suffering, not eliminates it, reduces it. You're no longer fighting reality. You're no longer disappointed when reality behaves exactly as your intelligence predicted it would. You're no longer shocked when happiness fades, relationships end, achievements feel hollow, and the cycle begins again. Schopenhauer wrote, "The greatest wisdom is to make the enjoyment of the present the supreme object of life, because that is the only reality, all else being the play of thought." But he also understood the cruelty of this wisdom. The intelligent person struggles to enjoy the present because they're always analyzing it. You can't lose yourself in the moment because you're too busy understanding the moment's impermanence, arbitrariness, and ultimate meaninglessness. So here's the final truth. You will suffer more than most people. This is not because something is wrong with you. This is because something is right with you. Your capacity for understanding, analysis, pattern recognition. These abilities come with a cost that nobody warned you about when they praised your intelligence. Accept it. Accept that consciousness is a burden you cannot set down. Accept that awareness creates distance from direct experience. Accept that intelligence isolates you from both easy pleasures and easy connections. Accept that you will analyze until analysis destroys joy, then analyze why that happened, then analyze your analysis. Accept it, and in that acceptance find not happiness, you know better than to pursue that now, but something else: dignity, intellectual honesty,
the cold comfort of seeing clearly in a world designed for the blind.
This is the reality that Schopenhauer spent his life articulating. The reality that most people never confront. The reality that your intelligence forces you to confront whether you want to or not. You can't unknow what you know. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't reduce your consciousness to a level where ignorance becomes possible again. So you move forward with clear eyes, accepting that clarity comes with a price most people never pay. If this video helped you understand your own suffering, if it named something you felt but couldn't articulate, I want you to do something. Write in the comments, "It made sense to me." Not because I need validation, but because you need to acknowledge to yourself that you're not alone in this, that other intelligent people are having this same experience, that your suffering isn't aberration, it's pattern recognition. I teach meditation and consciousness tools in my course linked below. Not to make you happy, I'm not going to lie to you about that, but to help you work with consciousness more skillfully, to suffer with more awareness and less resistance. If you found value in this philosophical analysis, subscribe to Thought Architect, hit the bell, and share this with someone else trapped in the same cognitive prison. And remember, you were not built to be happy, but you were built to understand. And understanding, however painful, is its own form of freedom. See clearly, suffer consciously, accept reality. That's all there is. That's all there ever was.